Hello, folks. I'd like to welcome you to Better Understandings of Science, and today we're talking about scientific and technical communication. Specifically, we're going to be delving into instructions and procedures. Our learning objectives for this section are we are going to describe the audience and purpose of instructions in the workplace, recognize the various formats for instructions, appreciate how instructions have serious legal implications, identify the main components of instructions, write a safe and effective set of instructions, explain the benefits of digital and online instructions, write a script for video instructions, write procedures to help groups of people coordinate their activities, and finally, evaluate the usability of instructional documentation. Let's break down instructions and procedures. Instructions specifically spell out steps required for completing a task or a series of tasks. For example, installing printer software on your computer or operating an electron microscope. Procedures, however, are going to be special types of instructions, and these are going to ensure that all members of a group, such as employees at the same company, follow the exact same steps to perform a particular task. What you really want to do when you're trying to develop out your instructions and procedures is you want to consider your audience and your purpose. The audience for these instructions and procedures consists of anybody who needs to know how to complete a task. The audience is going to vary in terms of what they already know, so consider prior knowledge or lack thereof very carefully. Specifically, you want to focus on whether or not you are making some instructions or procedures that are going to be used by peers or those who are going to be of a more general audience, perhaps executives, things of that nature. The purpose of instructions and procedures is to ensure the audience is able to complete the task. Cause safety is often involved, especially when it comes to dealing with instructions and procedures. You need to make sure that they meet the highest standards of excellence. So whatever the task, people are going to have some basic questions. First, they're going to ask, you're going to ask, why am I doing this? Second, you're going to wonder, how do I do it? What materials and equipment will I need? Where do I begin? What do I do next? And what could go wrong? Instructional documents take a variety of formats. Regardless of its formats, however, any set of instructions must meet the strict legal and usability requirements within the law or within the company that you work. Instructional formats are going to include manuals, quick reference materials, assembly guides, web-based instructions, and online help. Faulty instructions and legal liability. Instructional documents carry serious ethical as well as legal obligations on the part of those who prepare these documents. Instructional failures that could lead to legal problems are a failure to instruct and caution users in the proper use of a product, failure to warn against hazards from proper use of a product, failure to warn against possible misuses of a product, failure to explain a product's benefits and risks in a language that average consumers can understand, failure to convey the extent of risk with forceful language, and failure to display warnings properly. Elements of effective instructions. You want to make sure that you're following key parts of this. First, you want to make sure that you are using a clear and limiting title. Provide a clear and exact preview of the task. Inform content. Make sure that you know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I would recommend for those of you who are making procedures or instructions, it's often important for that person who is making them to have at least experienced the process of either using the instructions firsthand or firsthand knowledge of how a procedure works. And be sure to use visuals. In addition to showing what you do, visuals tend to attract the reader's attention and help keep words to a minimum. Types of visuals suited to instructions can include things like icons, representational and schematic diagrams, flowcharts, photographs, prose tables, so on and so forth. You also want to make sure that you're allowing for an appropriate level of detail and technicality. Write for a general audience if you don't know who you're writing to, okay? And you want to make sure that you do these three things. First, give readers enough background to understand why they need to follow these instructions. 2, give enough detail to show what to do. 3, give enough examples so each step can be visualized clearly. Next, you want to make sure that you have logically ordered steps, that these instructions are almost always arranged in some kind of chronological order, some means of following what you need to follow in order for something to get from A to B to C to D. You also want to make sure that you prepare any notes and hazard notices as they are needed. A note clarifies a point, emphasizes vital information, or describes options or alternatives. A caution prevents possible mistakes that could result in energy or equipment damage. A warning is going to alert users to potential hazards to life or limb. And a danger notice identifies an immediate hazard to life or limb. Also, you want to consider readability. Instructions must be understood on the first reading because people want to take an immediate action. To ensure readability, you want to first use direct address, active voice, and imperative mood. Second, you want to use short and logically shaped sentences. Third, you use parallel phrasing. Fourth, phrase instructions affirmatively. Leave very little wiggle room. 5, use transitions to mark time and sequence. Another thing you want to consider is effective design. The more accessible and inviting that design, the more likely your readers will follow the instructions. Use such design features as informative headers, numbered steps, ample white space, bullets, and plenty of visuals. Within science and technical communication, we love headers. Headers help us jump from one point in the document quickly to the next. This is something very important if you are building a vast procedural manual or something large for an instructional body that then you want to go and pass throughout a company. Then this allows that the department to jump directly to the instructions or procedures that then they need to navigate. And just like you would any kind of freshman composition paper, you want to make sure that you have within that document an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. In the introduction, you want to keep it short and get readers doing as soon as possible. In the body, provide the steps, visuals, and notes and hazards. In the conclusion, finally, you want to describe the expected results. Provide any type of follow-up information if it's needed, or provide troubleshooting advice. Some guidelines for providing appropriate detail within your documents. You want to make sure that you are providing all the necessary information. You want to make sure that you're not providing unnecessary information, as this can tend to bog down any of the information. It could lose your readers, and it could force them to skip important information that you may have wanted them to follow. Instead of focusing on the product, focus on the task. Get right to it. Go to it. Make sure that you're trying to omit steps that are just blatantly obvious. Unless you have several different red buttons, it may not necessarily be important to, give a diagram of, which red button to press. You want to also make sure that you are dividing the task into simple steps and sub-steps. Remember, try to use those headings as best you can in this situation. And then you want to adjust the information rate. Okay, it's important not to delve into an information overload kind of status. Try not to pound too much information into your reader all at one time, because this can tend to cause this glazing over effect, or even it could cause some serious confusion within the reading itself. So if you have a large amount of complex information, perhaps it'd be important to step back a little bit, give that bit of information, and then gradually go into something different. Okay, give them that information, break it up as best as possible so that it is more easily digestible. You want to also reinforce the prose with visuals if you can. Images within a document are extremely important, especially when it comes to instructions and procedures. When people see what they're doing, it tends to be a little easier to keep them moving. That said, make sure that you understand how you're using these visuals. Make sure that you don't, there isn't a rhetorical approach to this. People don't tend to, trust a lot of people who might be wearing a suit and tie and trying to work on a turbine generator, trying to, turn wrenches and things of that nature. There's a rhetorical ethos, and you want to make sure that you are adhering to that. At the same time, you also don't want to, avoid political, T-shirts. In fact, branding materials, any kind of brands and things are also good to leave out, especially if it's going to be something going across the office. Make sure that you're keeping it simple. Don't overcomplicate the instructions or the process. Be straight to the point. Make sure that you recognize the persuasive dimension of the instructions. Again, what we just talked about was a persuasive rhetorical element in the way that person might dress. But you also have to understand that logos and ethos are also going to come in, or pathos are going to come in, and we will be looking at how those things are actually portrayed. Make sure that when you are going and you're designing your instructions, make sure that you're using some informative headings, not just single word headings. You want to make sure that these headings are a little bit more specific, and they give me an idea, and they give people an idea of where they're going within that document. Make sure that you're arranging steps in a numbered list. If you have steps that are going to be done, make sure that it is in a numbered list, because it's often easier to track numbered lists than it is a standard bullet pointed list. Separate each step visually. Make sure that if it is a big complex step, you have that step with some sort of visual identifying marker. Use white space, use negative space, use the spaces to your advantage. And double space to signal any kind of new paragraph instead of just indenting. Now, that's going to differ from a lot of you folks who are going, you thinking writing a standard college term paper or freshman composition, what have you. Often they just tell you when it comes to formatting, all you really want is indentation to tell you when that's going to happen. That's not the way that we work within scientific and technical communication, especially with instructions and procedures. And make sure that you are making warning, caution, and danger notices highly visible. However, make sure that you are not overusing that information. What happens when you tend to overuse reds and colors and images for dangers and things like that, it tends to become washed away in this redundancy. And that's not good. You want warnings to be clear, and you want them to be only in positions where you have a potential for damaging the item, the process, or the person. Make visual and verbal information redundant. I know that seems a little odd when it comes off of the warnings, and you don't want warnings to be redundantly used because it does have that effect of making it feel less important. However, when it comes to the steps themselves, rewriting them in another way, making the visual a little clearer, say you do a visual image of someone who is pulling a lever, and then you can zoom in within another caption or so and just show that person is pulling a specific lever. Redundancy in that verbal and visual information can be important when it comes to trying to convey the process in the way you want to convey it. You also want to keep the visual and the step close together. It's not going to behoove you to go through on how you want somebody to do a certain thing and then have figure 7 fall 3 pages later. It can be extremely bothersome. Sometimes people can get a little discouraged or whatever and may skip it, and that could be something that's going to bother. It could hinder the process. So be sure that you're keeping that visual and the step as close together as you possibly can. This isn't necessarily a position or a place, for a table or a long list in the back of the book and appendices where you are going to be having all of your images that then they can go refer to. Instead, have them close by to that step. And make sure that you're considering a potentially multi-column design. And the reason why, in multi-column designs, we typically, our eyes flow a little easier, and it makes the information quicker to grasp, quicker to read through, and it's just it flows a little faster. And make sure that you're keeping it simple. Again, we're going to stress keeping it simple. Never overcomplicate the work you're doing. When it comes to lengthy instructions, you want to make sure that you consider some kind of a layered approach. Chunk it into pieces that you want people to do specifically in the order you want them to do it in. And when it comes to online instructions, make sure that you're using the appropriate software to format that information that you want to do. Often people will just use something as simple as Microsoft Word can be a great way when you go in and you throw in a table of contents, and that can make you jump directly to specified headings that you want to have people jump to. So make sure that you understand how the software works, the capabilities of it, and what you want to do with it. So when it comes to digital online online instructions, because of the costs that are typically involved in printing and updating instructions, especially lengthy user manuals, companies tend to shift to these online formats, or at least a combination of print and digital. The most common digital format for instructional material you're going to find out there is going to be PDF. And the reason why is because PDF often retains proper formatting no matter what computer or device you're using it across. Those of you who have ever tried to convert a Microsoft Word document into a PDF document, you have seen sometimes the way the formatting can typically go haywire. Or those of you who think you have the perfect document in some form of other text editor, and you go and you try to print it, and it is just going to come out like gobbledygook. So make sure that you're paying very close attention to how that information is going to be coming out. And PDF is typically the best way to go and make sure that you're getting that information in. Now, if you want more specific information, then you're going to need to go and figure out, or if you want to make sure that you want to have a more precise document, you may want to have people go in and actually look at potentially embedding fonts and embedding specific styles within that PDF document. And that you can get from different types of PDF procedures and instructions that you can find online. Also, when it comes to video instructions, increasingly organizations are creating instructions in video format and posting them on a video sharing site such as YouTube, or even their company website or wiki. It is becoming much, much more common. Combining sound, movement, color, speech, narration, and text, video instructions often show the full range of actions required to assemble the product or perform a task. We are all guilty. I have friends who have personally built entire homes or cabins using nothing but YouTube instruction. Sometimes that is some of the best and easiest ways to go out and make your instructions much more feasible for a wider audience, especially in today's day and age. You also To script video instructions, you want to make sure that you begin writing out printed instructions and then adapt them to a video format. So creating a form of like a strip can often help you create better finished products. Decide on backgrounds, foreground details, determine camera placements. And it is also going to, you also want to decide where and when to include specific music or text and write out the full narrative within there. So it's often good to have this, this static outline going into it. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to adhere to it 100%. Things may change. You may be able to adapt certain things to different elements depending on the environment. Make sure that you're scripting that video to provide separate segments that orient the viewer. Okay, give a list of parts, supply step-by-step instructions, and make sure that you offer a conclusion so that people meet the end, that they come to the point where they need to be. Also, as far as when it comes to procedures, make sure that instructions show an uninitiated person how to perform a specific task. Okay, procedures, on the other hand, provide rules and guidance for people who usually know how to perform a task, but they're required to follow some accepted practice for that. And we all know the folks out there who like to take the shortcuts. That's not always best practice. So make sure that people are following exactly what you want with procedures. When writing procedures, make sure you follow the same guidelines as instructions. However, the steps in a procedure may or may not need to be numbered, okay, depending on whether the steps need to be performed in a sequence or not. Evaluating the usability of instructions and procedures. A good usable document enables readers to easily locate the information they need, understand this information immediately, and use it safely and effectively. Always perform an evaluation by conducting a think aloud evaluation. A group of colleagues talking through the document to test its effectiveness can be really helpful. Or setting up a focus group. Okay, focus groups can be very important. This is going to be a group of people from outside of that company invited in to test a document. This is a lot of you folks, a lot of you younger folks out there may understand how this works with video games when you have betas that people will then go out and play. While some people consider them lucky who are testing out beta video games or whatever. They are also at the same time working out any kind of kinks that might be within that software or gameplay. Okay, finally, folks, I want you to consider a few questions. All right, consider these questions going in through the rest of this module. What is the difference between instructions and procedures? What are 3 formats instructional documents can typically take? 3. What are 3 instructional failures that can lead to a legal liability? 4. What are the 8 elements of effective instructions? 5. What is the function of a note in a set of instructions? What is the difference between a caution, a warning, and a danger sign? Why is readability so important when writing instructions? Why is design important when you're creating instructions? Why do procedures, unlike instructions, sometimes not include ordered steps? And finally, what is usability, and what are 2 ways to test the usability of instructions? With that said, I'd like to thank you all for coming and checking out the latest video from Better Understandings of Science, Science and Technical Communication, Instructions and Procedures. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, or feel free to email me. Otherwise, I'll see you guys the next video. Thanks.